Yeah, all right.
No, we're sticking with the one for now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. So we have a very special seminar today. We've invited a bunch of our former alumni to tell us about their journey after grad school. And so I won't take away any more time. I'm just gonna let you guys maybe introduce yourselves quickly, and then we'll kind of just go around like this, if you guys don't mind. Yeah.
Calvin has to go last because he has the most robust slides.
All right, Calvin, you're last.
All right, sounds good. Robust.
Yeah. I know your work.
Okay, so please, would you?
I'm starting?
Yes, you're.
No pressure.
You're going to be.
Said I was last.
Okay, should I go over there, Alan?
Yes, I've got you set up over here. Okay, so.
Exciting.
This one is you, right?
Yep.
All right, here you
I
go.
tried to answer some of your prompts. Cool. Do I need to? Hello, everybody. It's fun to be back here in the room, but in the wrong building first, because I forgot what it was like here. So thanks, Alan, for inviting us all. And I just interrupt me if you have questions. This doesn't have to be formal. We'll have a conversation, I know, but I'll start with who I am and why we're here. So I worked with Susan and Calvin and Dylan to some extent back in 2012 on bike planning and TTP, and then stuck around to do a PhD in ag and resource economics, and left transportation for the saddest 5 years of my life, and then came back as soon as I finished my PhD back into transportation. And what I really love is that you had asked, how did TTP kind of connect you to your work, or how did that play into kind of your career? And the irony is that even though I did a PhD in economics in urban water conservation, I signed up for one of the UC Davis governor forum little research agenda setting in Sacramento as a note taker. Wasn't invited, just volunteered to go take notes because it sounded really fun. And someone offered me a job there. And so I just really owe everything to ITS, A, for training me, and then B, for providing these opportunities for students to connect with policymakers and be in the conversation in Sacramento. That's a really special thing that Davis has. So that's how I ended up with my current job. So I work at Berkeley Lab. I did not know Berkeley Lab did transportation stuff. I had never heard of it as a student here. And I would like to be an ambassador for the lab today and say, we have so many grad students from Berkeley. Davis grad students, come work with us. We really need you. So we have the Sustainable Transportation Initiative, STI, unfortunately. And we work really closely with UC Berkeley faculty and students, and occasionally, I know we work with Lou, Fulton on hydrogen stuff. We sometimes branch out to Davis, but just want to emphasize, have you join cameras. So since I didn't know what Berkeley Lab was, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with Berkeley Lab, but it's a nice, I think, pathway if, like me, you like research, but you don't want to live in a vacuum in a lab. And you like teaching, but you don't want the pressure of teaching and research and tenure. And so the labs are a fun place. There's 17 national labs, and we all work on different things. There's soil science, there's a lot of basic science, there's some transportation, renewable energy. You've probably heard of the NREL. So because they're government owned, they're really driven by policy relevant work, which I appreciate. And it's not an academic setting, and so it's a lot less competitive. It's you can work with anyone you want on anything you want if someone's willing to pay for it. So there's a lot of freedom there. And then we are like still part of UC Berkeley, so if you want to teach, you have an option to teach, but you don't have to teach. So there's a nice flexibility there. And then we have this like infinite pipeline of grad students from Berkeley, but it would be great to add Davis to the pipeline. So I mentioned like, because we're part of the National Lab system, which was a complete black box to me in grad school, there's this really nice like reciprocal relationship where you can go. I worked with a lot of folks from Argonne National Lab and Oak Ridge and NREL and Pacific Northwest National Lab, like labs I didn't know existed either. It's super collaborative, and you can like right now I'm working for DOE, the Department of Energy. You can get borrowed and lent out to different federal agencies and like keep your job, come back. So it's nice, like after doing a lot of coding for a few years, like now I just work in policy for the last 2 years, but can go back and like do research whenever that feels like the right time to go back. So I wish that I knew about this as a student. I got lucky and stumbled across someone who worked there, but I think we kind of ignore the national labs in the like job market search a little bit. It's a nice like between private, government, and academic. So yeah, and then like, I don't know, there's something like 10,000 employees there. You can work in like all different, there's no like boundaries between departments. So if you want to collaborate with a geologist on something fun, like you're all welcome to. So this is just like a few of the projects that I've gotten to work on. I started there in 2019, so it's been like 5.5 years. But like for those of you who do travel demand modeling, we have our big fancy agent-based model beam.
Did you work with Colin?
Yeah, before he abandoned us.
Yes.
But Beam is still going strong,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they're looking for more modelers. That's not my area of expertise, but I do work with them on that. We develop like open access tools. So the national labs are like all about open source everything. So for the Justice 40 initiative, which you may or may not be familiar with, the Biden administration had basically set a new executive order that 40% of benefits of federal investments for certain things, but clean transportation and energy is one of them, go to disadvantaged communities. So we worked to like put together what does that mean for DOE, who are these communities. Right now I'm working, so I think I said I'm at DOE for the last 2 years, working on our federal strategies for transport decarbonization. So for the very first time in history, the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Transportation, DOE, and HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, I guess, signed an MOU to like coordinate, which we've never tried to do, and it's been like kind of a nightmare, but also really fun, to think about like transport decarbonization in a holistic way. So that's like ITS's bread and butter, and I'm sure a lot of you have maybe kind of consulted with different people involved in that. So what I do now...
Can I mention really quick?
Yeah.
That blueprint was heavily influenced by another Davis alum as well. So.
Who's that?
Oh my God, what's her name?
Oh, Tatiana.
Tatiana, yeah, Tatiana.
Yeah,
yes.
So Tatiana Kuntz.
Yes.
Davis has their fingerprints all over the fence. It's really fun. Tatiana worked on the blueprint. Like Austin Brown obviously was at the White House and now at DOE. So it is really fun to like see every year at TRB there's like more people who are from ITS and more people that you're working with at like CARB and the feds. So I think to be honest, this is not something I ever expected to be doing in my life. I studied bicycle planning. And I think another kind of interesting aspect of the lab system is like you can find yourself in new like spheres that you are not necessarily an expert in, but can learn quickly and like just start, I don't know, not start over, but now I just like live and breathe trains, which is not something that I ever planned in grad school. And that's largely a coincidence because there's so many people working on so many different things at the labs. Is literally the person in the office next door to mine, and we started collaborating, and then so I think my point there is like it doesn't have to be premeditated, just like seize opportunities as they seem exciting to you. And so now I think I got a lot of like, learning in the research world and training, and what I was completely unprepared for is like what it means to collaborate at a federal level. Something like 100 people are kind of providing input on our national plan for rail, which I'm leading. So it's like a whole, just jumping into the deep end, trying to understand how to translate academic work, like deal with labor unions, environmental justice groups, industry, like all the different people you kind of get to ignore while you're doing your PhD, suddenly have a lot more weight in decision making. And so that's something I found really, really fun, honestly, but really challenging. And so all that combined is what I'm working on. So that's going to be published later this year. You can throw tomatoes. So just to wrap it up in terms of like, I think I don't know how replicable my path is because it feels like it was quite random. But because of that, I think like putting yourself where you want to be, like I was in econ, I was doing water. It was like an expedient pathway to get a PhD, and I don't feel bad about that, but that wasn't where my heart and soul was, like when it was working with Susan on bikes. And so just like seriously, like being able to like go show up at this Davis event and be like obviously so excited and passionate about it that someone saw potential in me, even though I had abandoned transportation for 5 years. Just put yourself out there, like in the places that you really like, with the people you want to work with and on the topics you want to work with. I think it's really easy to like say, well, this is a good job, I'll just take this for now. But first try for the things you really care about, and like sometimes we all have to make compromises. This has been so funny to me. Like I had such incredible imposter syndrome in economics, and then also at Berkeley Lab, and then coming to the federal government, you see that like paltry set of information that people have when they're making these decisions. Like we need to put a number in like Biden's speech in an hour. How many cars are going to be replaced by this train? You're like, okay, so people are doing back of the envelope math to prepare for a political decision. And that that has been so eye-opening to be like, no, I do have a lot of information to contribute here. We like get so fixated on the like how can I make this very complex model like marginally more complex, and that's important and hard. But there's so much actually that we can offer to the people who are under a lot of pressure to make decisions without like the luxury of having like 5 or 6 years at Davis to like really think through a lot of stuff. And I did not do a lot of this in grad school, and wish I did, because we get really good education in the technical side, but just trying to like translate your research all the time, with like grad slams, like things that I always shied away from, I think would be really helpful to practice. I suffered from this. I think everyone I know who was ever in grad school did, like really holding on to your dissertation like it's like the most precious baby in the world, and it's okay. It's okay if it doesn't change the world. Just like know that you're going to go on to do other great work also. And sometimes getting out of grad school is the most important part of grad school. Speaking to power, like I think there's a lot, especially being part of the national lab system, the like administration changes the priorities for funding all the time, and people are just like, well, I'm going to study methane now, and now it's back to hydrogen. And like there's some amount of that you can't avoid, but I think we would all be better off if we could like not be so influenced by whatever is kind of in vogue at the time to research. Like Davis obviously is a great example because you're like decades ahead on EVs. and like trying to anticipate what might be relevant in 5 or 10 years, and not just like what people care about today because it's fashionable. And then collaborating with people outside of academia, because they're the ones who actually get to make all the decisions, turns out. And this is really fun. Now Austin, who was like formerly here, is my boss at DOE. I work with Raphael, who's the only person I ever know who studied trains at Davis. Definitely work on trains. Berkeley Lab at this point is not hiring anyone for transportation, but EERE, so that's like, what's up there? Energy efficiency and renewable energy. Our DOE office is hiring a ton of people, so if you're at all interested, just email me or call me. So there, 14 and a half minutes, not too bad.
Oh, nice.
Wow. Thanks everyone.
I guess we can do questions at the end unless people have like very specific questions, but I'm hoping we can get like a little panel of questions later. So, Kadir, you want to take it away?
Next, okay.
Yeah. You don't have slides, right? So.
Right. Hi, everybody. So nice to be back here, and it's a pleasure to meet new TTP and other transportation students here. My name is Kadir. I work for the California Energy Commission, so I will be representing the California state government. So let me go through the first slide. I don't have any slides, but I have the questions. I'm gonna go through it. So I graduated from TTP in 2015. Started the program in 2010, and partly because I really wanted to learn about social science. I had this, suddenly when I was doing my master's in electrical engineering, working on circuits, suddenly I had this came from nowhere, passionate about understanding social dynamics, and looked over like any social scientist who does electric vehicles. I was doing internship at Berkeley National Lab, and I connected with Tom Turrentine. I'm sure as you know his legacy, and he informed me about this program, TTP, and that was the kind of reason how I liked it. I looked very interdisciplinary, very exciting. So I applied, and he offered research funding. So eventually came here. No information about California policies at all, and even in general, like the transportation policy. I think the first time it was my first year. I took dance class, sustainable transportation, and that's the first time I kind of heard about the Air Resources Board and what they do. Attended that time the Governor Schwarzenegger's Global Climate Summit. That was a big event. It was very inspiring. So worked on my first 3 years. I worked with the Electric Vehicle Research Center. Any EV research? Any EV students, EV center students here? Vehicle? C2? Great. So in my first 3 years, I had a chance to take classes from all over across disciplines: social science, economics, environmental, and it was just it helped me develop this perspective where I feel comfortable talking to people with any backgrounds. But it was a difficult transition, so I definitely had a lot of challenges. But I had really good support at TTP. I think I was, people, one of less than, I don't know, maybe 5 people who had electrical engineering background at the time. So I think that was also kind of less common. Anyone here with electrical engineering background? Electrical?
Without?
With electrical circuits? Okay. Yeah, but it turned out to be a good fit. So eventually, after learning about different disciplines, I went back to systems modeling in my last 2 years. And as a part of my dissertation, I worked on California's vehicle grid roadmap, PUC's first EV proceeding, where they provided certain time of use rates, a lot of incentives for EV drivers at that time. It was like the first kind of program. I had a chance to talk to the senator who actually introduced a bill that required public utilities commission to provide that incentive to EV drivers. I had a chance to talk to utilities, automakers. So I did a stakeholder interview basically, and I used the policy theory models to kind of analyze that, to describe the policy process. And eventually, my first 2 years, I worked with SMAT and received their distribution system data and tried to simulate if you replace randomly a certain number of vehicles. Actually, in that project, I only considered single-family occupier household. So for single-family households, if you randomly distribute a certain number of electric vehicles, what will be the impact on the distribution system and the cost-benefit analysis. So I had a great time. Again, last 2 years I was a STEP student. For 5 years I attended STEP's meetings. I think I had this, TDB gave me a great opportunity to connect with the state programs. Attended the first the Independent System Operator KISO workshop where they crafted the concept of vehicle grid integration. So at that time people were like, what should we call this? V1G, V2G, charged EV, managed EV charging. So there were lots of concepts kind of floating around, but eventually they stick into vehicle grid integration. And as I was graduating after 5 years, worked with John Ogden, who's now retired, I decided to stay in the area. And there's actually a little background. So it's kind of also unusual. I came here as an international student, and I work with a state agency. So normally, state agencies, they don't sponsor visa. So it's kind of backstory that, maybe some of you might find this interesting. My student visa was expiring when I was in Davis, my third year. And I had to, go back to Turkey and renew my visa. But instead of that, I wanted to try my chance with the green card lottery. So I just, came from nowhere. I just applied, submitted some random, very casual picture, but eventually that kind of worked. So I actually won the lottery and got the green card. And when I graduated, I could work for the state agency. So we wanted to stay in the area. My wife and I, we met at UC Davis. Yeah, she's from Davis, so we wanted to kind of stay in the area. And I started looking for a job at the state agencies. And I found a job at CEC, where they were just starting a new project on EV infrastructure assessment. So they were trying to understand how many chargers we need by different location types and what's going to be the cost to the state. And that was a push from the governor's office. And the program that I worked for in my first 3 years, they first time hired 10 air pollution specialists, which is like a technical position. And I had a chance to kind of get one of those positions, and they asked me to well, you did the simulation for Smart Sacramento, why don't we do this for the state? It was, of course, it has some challenges because the state didn't want to consider any early adopter surveys, which skewed toward certain demographics, right? High income, single family owner. So we had to kind of change that perspective. We kind of simulated a scenario where, regardless of demographics, we randomly replace certain number of vehicles at the county level and find out how many charging stations we need at especially multi-family, public, workplace, DC fast chargers. And that project became very influential. So that actually, when I was working on my first 3 years, we were not expecting this project will be very influential because the program didn't have the expertise to execute a technical project, to be honest. So I had to do challenges, explaining this is a modeling project. I have to publish this. I have to spend time on this. But they were assigned lots of other different funding-related assignments. But eventually, once we published the report, it went viral. So it triggered the assembly bill that actually required CC to continue that work. It used in the Governor Jerry Brown's latest the final EV executive order to set the charging station targets. It also being used on the National EV Infrastructure Deployment Program. So they actually used the same model, light version. I was working with NREL, so NREL actually developed a light version of the framework, and they are now using for the entire U.S. basically to decide how much funding they're going to allocate for different counties at the county level across the different states. So just kind of give you an idea. You work with a state agency. Sometimes it can feel very boring and lots of administrative items, but eventually, if you have the passion, I think you can find an opportunity to make a difference. And in any program, you kind of execute the administration's agenda, but at the same time, you have this authority and here and there that you can actually make a difference. And bring your own personal perspective on issues. So. Oh my gosh, I'm on the first question. Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of fast forward from here. After 3 years, I moved to the R&D program, so the Energy Commission had different programs. There's Clean Transportation Program, which does the EV infrastructure deployment, and there's the R&D program, which oversees the electricity R&D program. So basically, we use the utility R&D program funding. With the philosophy behind it is that the utilities don't have an incentive to do R&D because they make money by maintaining infrastructure, so they don't have that much incentive to invest in efficiency and load flexibility. So they transfer that amount, their R&D funding from ratepayers to the California Energy Commission, and the Energy Commission used that funding to fund a variety of startups, university projects, national labs. So I'm currently overseeing this small team of engineers, and we oversee the demand flexibility program. So we have currently 6 projects and 1 program with Berkeley National Lab, Natalie's program. And we basically design the objectives of their project. We are saying, you're going to deliver answer these research questions, you're going to deliver these technologies, and then they have 5 years to complete that. And as a part of our role is kind of oversee the progress, support them, make sure their progress is being heard by other state agencies. So they actually use what they hear from the field, they actually use in policymaking. So our kind of role has been changed over the last 5 years, especially since COVID. There were some reforms on the bureaucracy, internal bureaucracy. So now I think we have less administrative burden, more time to actually inform policy, especially the utility policies, overall energy, long-term energy planning policies. So let me go back to my list here. I should forget to set the timer. Am I doing good here?
Yeah. Do
you have a timer here?
It's kind of flexible, up to you if you feel like you've covered everything, or we can leave stuff for questions as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. So. One thing maybe I can touch base is what I would advise for people who are interested in your system planning, especially for the state agencies, perhaps for the Air Resources Board. So I think I wish I could spend more time on understanding data science, because it's becoming much more influential in terms of both long-term planning and short-term planning, forecasting, big data applications. So right now I'm working with a team at CEC where they are using the smart meter data. So the entire, all the smart meter data from all customer types from 6 largest utilities in California. So that's like over 90% of the smart meter data comes to the Energy Commission to be used for energy planning. So we have a lot of big data. But we also need a lot of people who has the expertise, the analytical expertise. So I didn't have the opportunity to take Alan's energy systems modeling course at the time. That was not offered, and also the data science, the energy data course. So I think those are extremely important courses. Good job, Alan.
Well, it's because you haven't taken them.
But I know how important they are. So I'm missing that. So even though I'm missing that, the other thing is you might think, you might work in projects where you have the opportunity, but now I kind of transitioned into, over the last 2 years, more kind of supervisor, manager role. And once you kind of, you get that promotion and kind of be in charge of a variety of projects and programs, you don't have the time to kind of do all those skills. You can do it as a hobby, but obviously data science requires lots of commitment, mental focus. So it's not easy to do that on the side. So I think grad school is a tremendous opportunity to kind of get familiar with data science methodologies, machine learning. Just using some ad hoc data. There are lots of data sources by DOE and CEC is also coming. As I mentioned, that the smart meter data is coming too. So definitely, spend more time on that. Be on top of those methodologies. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
Lots
great.
of things here. Okay. I was exhausted.
Katrina, you're up.
Hey guys, I don't have any slides, so we're just gonna figure this one out. But I have a piece of paper, which I wrote notes down, so we'll see how this goes. So I'm Katrina. I graduated from TTP in 2020. So y'all have had your very fun time like being in the world, and I've been out for like 3.5, 4 years now, which is crazy. Like I did not think that much time would pass. So I work with Gil and Scott. I don't see Scott, and Alan and Dan, just everybody here having a good time. I worked with workplace charging and did some really interesting interviews on how to look at managing the existing infrastructure and how to like increase utilization and adoption of vehicles, and then getting more turnover with what we have going on. It's like fascinating, so cool. Now I work at CALSTART. I've been there since I graduated, and I work primarily actually with transit buses and looking at helping transit agencies adopt electric buses, primarily in California, but also just sort of across the country. But California has a state mandate where all the buses have to transition to zero emission by 2040. So all the transit agencies are like freaking out about this. Like they do not know how to handle this. And so we're very patiently sort of working with them, borrowing some lovely state funds, mostly from Caltrans, to really help them figure out how many buses they're gonna need, do some route modeling, looking at infrastructure, and also talking to PG&E et al. And trying to figure out how much power we can get out to their locations. It's crazy, so interesting, wild. Not what I did here though. You see, I went from light duty to heavy duty. So a car, right? You can handle 6 kilowatts and you're set. Bus, you need like 100, maybe like 100, 150, 500 kilowatts. Totally different scale. So interesting. So kind of what I do. My background is actually, so I grew up with electric vehicles back in the day. We had the EV1, so the old style paddle chargers, which is so, like, to see where things have gone from then to now has been so fascinating. And to be a part of that, so cool. So what I like is very niche, like this is where I want to be. I'm very happy here. So it's great. So CALSTART, just so everybody knows, is not a state agency. The name is a misnomer. It's been around for about 30 years now because it started in California, the Cal part, but it's a nonprofit that has, I can do the mission statement here, I'm not very good at it, but we'll see. So the mission statement is, it's accelerating zero emission transportation. That's like, there you go, right? Very vague, which means we can do a lot of different things, but it's very vague, right? So like we have a policy team, we have a data and analytics team, we have the transit team, which I'm working on, do electric school buses, innovative mobility. I do a lot of consulting with transit agencies, like I said, and also just some very interesting and fun research. So we get a lot of funding from the CEC, so thanks, from CARB, from, foundation funding, and also from like member companies, so like sort of the private sector, I suppose is what you would say, and also the feds. So for example, I'm doing a couple of really large projects for the FTA, so the Federal Transit Administration. I just finished up a really interesting wireless charging project, so crazy, like wireless charging of heavy duty vehicles. It's actually fairly complicated, so we're talking about that because the FTA was like, oh, does transit need this? So we're figuring it out. Why not? We're smart like that. We're also looking at, like, I do demonstration projects. So I'm looking at demonstration projects mostly across California. and helping support, like we're doing an interesting one with hydrogen fuel cell vans in the desert, because it's hot in the desert, so we gotta figure that one out. As well as HVAC. Yeah, I get to do, I have a really interesting project about diesel-fired heaters in electric buses, which is so niche and nobody cares about it, but I care about it, and we got funding, so that means everybody has to care about it. Everybody has to deal with this because I got it. We also do stuff like starting a project about residual values of electric transit buses. So battery. See, it's very new. I don't know all the words yet. So it's like batteries as well as fuel cells. So like, what do you do with those at end of life? I know somebody here is doing something, so I wish to speak to them. I know Meg was doing something. I need to talk to whoever's doing it. Anyway, it's very fun. So ITS, so I did my master's here, obviously. My background is, I guess my educational background is a little bit fun too. So I did my undergrad here at Davis, and then I worked with Gil as a student, and they didn't kick me out, so I just kept working. And then I became staff. And then I was like, well, I could do a degree. And Gil was like, okay, like just do that. I was like, okay, I'll just do that. And here we are. And now I'm back again. Because Alan was like, just come out. I was like, okay, I live on West Sac. I can come out. Charging my car. This is good. Have a good time here. It's good, right? It's fun. I've lost track of all the things I was going to say. But yeah, so ITS. Okay, ITS prepped me. I took notes. It's good. Prepared here. So it really helped me like how to think and really thinking about like how to be not necessarily like diverse. So like Kadir is started from the technical background and sort of moved into social science. I did a little bit of that too, not as intense as that because I'm not like, you're good, like that's crazy. But you know, thinking about like, okay, if you have this modeling, how can you really think about how to bring that knowledge out into like the general public and really explain it to people? Because it's really only as good as the what is it? It's like, oh gosh, like you think about it and then you have to educate people because if you don't teach people what you did, then did you do anything at all? So like I do a lot of education and talk to people about electric vehicles. Is it be it my car or really transit buses or heavy duty infrastructure as a whole? You would be shocked. I have to explain a number of things to transit agencies that I don't feel like I should explain. like okay, like let's talk about charging a vehicle right now. Like okay, let's talk about hydrogen. Like how does that work? It's like who could say how hydrogen works? You just put it in there and you see how it goes. Anyway, so I think like education is an often underappreciated part of thinking about all this great work that you're developing. Because you have to get out there, you have to show it to people. Otherwise, like, come on guys. So it doesn't have to be the most beautiful, big, awesome thing, but if somebody, you know, if you want to have your work used or thought about, you really have to get it, you have to put it in an explainable way. So that's what ITS really helped me with that. We have all of these things. We have this Friday seminar, we have STEPS, we have Asilomar, EBS, TRB, all these fun acronyms to really get information out there and really share what everybody's doing. Because y'all are doing such cool things. Wow, like look at this. Also, it's really fun to like network and like see all these cool people doing all this fun stuff. Like, what is it, like more brains better than one brain? Like, come on guys, it's Friday, it's nap time for me. Also, I do take naps, it's terrible. Don't, it's that slippery slope with old person. Thinking about like holistically and like how to really like take what you know and combine it with other people's information and like really like make something better together. So like think about that. Advice to give, I said education already because that one's like near and dear to my heart. Actually, interviews are really fun to do. I recommend you guys try to do interviews. Like I was trying to explain to people at CALSTART how cool interviews are, and they were like, eh, and then we did some, and I was like, yeah, they're good. It was like super fun. Yeah. Oh, so some other fun stuff I'm doing is like, I said that already. I don't know, maybe I'm not. We're doing like medium and heavy duty incentive programs, so we help fleets and such adopt electric zero emission vehicles. We also help with the infrastructure. Not just with like planning infrastructure, but also distributing state funds to lower the cost of entry. We're also looking at like workplace charging, which is my favorite thing, as well as like home-based charging, especially considering apartments and MUDs. and sort of that realm of things as well. So yeah, totally fun stuff. Trends in the sector, I think that was one of the things I saw. I wrote it down. I would say transit agencies, and I would say other companies as well, are really into microgrids right now. So we're talking about like DERs and BGI and all these other fun letters. Microgrids, like really hot. Because transit agencies have to be able to be online in a power outage because they're often part of the emergency response team or whatever, so they have to move all these people. So they have to be able to operate, like, police, like fire department. And so if you have these electric buses, you don't want to have the diesel or the CNG, you can have a natural gas generator as well. You don't want that with your buses. And so there's been a lot of really interesting pushes for microgrids with all the solar, as well as battery storage, and sort of how to make the whole transit agency flexible, adaptable, and ready to go. You also have to explain it to them because they have the idea. Sometimes they don't have the idea. Takes a hot set. The other thing is hydrogen. I didn't start with hydrogen. I personally don't see hydrogen for light duty. For medium and heavy duty, they're starting to sway me over. But it's a really interesting and really important for transit agencies because a lot of times they go 500 miles in a day. And you just can't do that right now with electric buses. It just doesn't work. So looking at not only solutions considering hydrogen, but also thinking about, I guess, more creative charging methods, like wireless, like pantograph charging, like battery swapping, crazy. But then also thinking about what other alternatives are out there. And so being able to sort of talk to transit agencies and other fleets and really give them an approach, or give them a few options and make sure they understand what is available to them and what is just totally pie in the sky. You can model anything, but does it exist? Who could say? I have no idea, but we're figuring it out, right? I think that's it. Yeah, there you go. That's all I have to say. We'll have more questions, right?
Yes. Last up.
I do.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Calvin Thigpen. I am the Director of Policy Research at Lime, and it's really good to be back here in Davis today. Like Katrina, I was here for a while. I was here for a decade. I could not get pulled away. It definitely feels like coming home to Davis. So I got my undergrad here in Davis in evolution and ecology. I also got a minor in social cultural anthropology. So I kind of had a little bit of the opposite of Kadir, coming from a little bit more the social sciences background and then coming into TTP. When I was an undergrad, I spent a lot of time running. So that's us winning the men's cross country championship for the Big West back in 2010. So that was a big moment. I also met my wife here at Davis. And so lots of fond memories here. We had our first child while I was getting my PhD. So very glad to be back. My PhD, my master's and my PhD, I worked with Susan. So I worked on bicycling, and it was very focused on thinking about how experiences either in youth or even in college with bicycling, especially here in Davis, influence the types of attitudes and perceptions that people carry with them, right, about bicycling. So it's very theoretical, very focused on perceptions and attitudes, kind of these abstract ideas. After that, though, I did a brief postdoc at Arizona State University, and then right at that moment, 2017, 2018, was when dockless bikes were arriving on the scene, dockless scooters were arriving on the scene, and so I saw an opportunity at Lime and to be the Director of Policy Research, and I applied, and I've been there for 5.5 years now. And the type of work I do, I'll go through some fun highlights, some career highlights from Lime. But just in general, what I do at Lime is actually really similar to what I was doing here at Davis. A lot of very academic focused work. I continue to collaborate with a variety of academics around the globe. from Cornell, University of Oregon, Monash University in Australia, some collaborators in Europe as well. So continue to do very sort of academic work, rigorous work, but then of course, going from that very sort of conceptual dissertation work, I very quickly learned that industry is very different pace, and as a couple other of the panelists have alluded to, it's really rewarding because you get to translate research into practice in a way that is a little bit more challenging to do, especially as a sort of new and up and coming student that you don't necessarily haven't maybe figured out quite yet. So I've really loved my job at Lyme. I'll just go through a few highlights of what I've done. The first, and this one is definitely one of my proudest moments, was getting a pathway for shared scooters and shared bikes established in the low carbon fuel standard, which I learned about in dance class, first year of grad school. And actually a sort of funny story, I heard about this opportunity to create this new pathway from Jeff Kessler, who was another TTP grad. So as Natalie said, ITS Davis folks are kind of everywhere. And so I'm sure you're all familiar with the low carbon fuel standard. And so what was the challenge here was, there's with shared scooters and shared bikes, there are perceptions that they don't last very long. And this is sort of a hangover from the early days when shared scooter fleets were sort of off-the-shelf units. There was a report that they only lasted a month before having to get replaced. And so the industry is still dealing with that perception. It's no longer the case. You can see, this is a Lime vehicle, but other companies have similarly robust vehicles nowadays that last much longer. And so getting this pathway through was really a nice sort of seal of approval from the California Air Resources Board, which is, sets some of the most stringent environmental policies in the world, that shared scooters have come a long way in a short time. And it was this really long process. It actually took us about 2 or 3 years of working in concert with folks at the California Air Resources Board, one of whom was a undergrad that I was a TA for. There's no conflict of interest though, because we did have to get validated by a third party. They came to our warehouse and saw all of our operations, our data processing and all of that. And last year we finally got the pathway approved.
Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So there's different pathways for different vehicle types in the low carbon fuel standard. So one example I like is there's a pathway for forklifts. So if you want to purchase an electric forklift and operate your electric forklift, you are probably replacing a diesel or gas powered forklift. And so the pathway for that is really simple, right? You're directly replacing with electric, power, something that was gas powered. And so the pathway takes into account not only energy efficiency, but also the carbon intensity of the different fuels, and considers what you're replacing, what you're adding and what you're replacing.
And what do you get for that?
So because of the way the low carbon fuel standard is set up, where you get credits if you are below the standard at the time, someone buying an electric forklift would get money from this program, from companies, transportation fuel producers that are above the standard. And so
they're buying the credits.
They're buying the credits, exactly. And so now scooters and bikes, again, are below that standard, and so we too are eligible to receive, not millions by any means, but a small amount of money for our operations in California. Thanks for asking. Next, this is another study that we recently completed. Lime and other micromobility companies offer low-income, reduced fare programs. We call ours Lime Access. This is to people who are typically on some sort of government assistance program. And this was completed only late last year, but no one had really done research on these programs about who was using them, how they used them, and so we set out to do that. And I worked with a professor at Monash University, Alexa Del Bosque, who I first met at a TRB conference, so go to the conferences, make connections. And we collaborated to send out a survey to our Lyme Access writers and our non-access writers in Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. And we asked a whole host of questions about what types of trips people were taking, how did they use it in conjunction with transit, and then crucially, we actually asked this open-ended question about, just tell us about how you use Lyme, how Lyme Access has affected your life. And so we came away with these really useful insights about the impact that Lyme Access has on these travelers, their lives. They use it. Lyme Access users, depend on Lyme Access. They make all sorts of everyday, essential trips, utilitarian trips on Lyme Access. They use it really flexibly and interchangeably with public transit, which is really encouraging. And then again, with that open-ended question, we learned a lot about the riders. And honestly, reading through some of those responses brought tears to my eyes, because it was very meaningful what this brought to those people's lives. So we've actually learned that a decent proportion of our riders have some sort of disability. It might be an invisible disability. And so having access to a scooter or a bike at a discounted rate made a big difference for them trying to navigate their city. And then last but not least, parking is one of the biggest issues that people have with dockless shared scooters and bikes. And so pretty much from day one at Lyme, I've been doing some sort of study on parking, trying to figure out how much there is and what to do about it, what sort of solutions to solve it. And so I've been doing that with University of Oregon professor Ann Brown and Cornell University professor Nick Klein. And we've sort of come away with these 6 very high-level takeaways. I'll just talk through a couple of them just to get some highlights. And then I'll close with some unsolicited advice. So the first one, this was the first study we did, we sent student research assistants out to the field to go look at scooters, take measures, see how much space was remaining on the sidewalk between a parked scooter and the rest of the sidewalk. Took all sorts of measurements, and we did it in 5 different US cities. And what you can see here with the blue, this is actually, we also had them look at cars. So that's what you're seeing in blue, is the percent of parked cars that were violating the access for other drivers. And in the almost imperceptible green is bikes and scooters. And so the point, the very clear takeaway here is, improper scooter parking does happen. It's maybe not as frequent as people think it is. It's a real issue. It's an issue we need to solve. But zooming out, there's trying to add some perspective to the conversation. This one was one of my favorite studies as well. We again sent out a survey to writers. And we showed them a series of images, and I actually drew these images, so I'm very, very proud of that. And so you can see there's a bunch of different dots corresponding to different sort of scenarios, parking scenarios. Some were, as you can see, sort of in the upper right quadrant, were viewed by the public as very obviously parked properly. So that's the y-axis at the top is they parked properly. Very bottom is not properly. The x-axis is, this is not clutter, this is clutter. So people, if you parked in a bike rack, parked in a corral, if you had scooters parked like this, pretty much everyone agreed that's not only proper, but it's tidy as well. Bottom left is the opposite. If it's a tipped over scooter, blocking a door, blocking a curb cut, people get that that's not okay. But what was really fascinating to me was how much people equate tidiness with proper parking. Because all that's changed between that image and that image is the orientation of the scooters to each other, right? So what we think was happening, as I alluded to earlier, this is what we're seeing on the ground. This is what other people have seen as well. Scooter parking, missed parking doesn't happen that often, but people get really bothered by it, right? Like it really feels wrong sometimes if people aren't parking in sort of a neat and tidy way. So I thought that was a really interesting finding. And then again, getting to like, what are the solutions? How are we actually going to, address this issue? We did a follow-up study where we shared a bunch of parking data with researchers, and we looked at how much parking do you actually need to provide so that people will park compliantly. And not getting too much into the details, what we found is you need to have about 25 parking corrals per square kilometer, or roughly you need to have no more than about a 2-minute walk between corrals. And it's been really well received. Cities have already started to use this when they're planning out their corral networks, their bike rack networks. And so again, that's been one of the really rewarding things, is getting to work with practitioners to literally change how their shared micromobility systems are, their infrastructure systems are as well. Some quick highlights from my time at Davis. Again, I was here for 10 years, but I'm going to focus more on the grad school days. Made some of my really great friendships here at Davis, Dylan Fitch. Not only just a really great friend, but also continuing to collaborate even after grad school. I mentioned Jeff Kessler. He was the one who turned me on to the LCFS opportunity.
And he created MobQuest.
He did, and I was on that first MobQuest. There's lots of people I haven't mentioned. Those two just came to mind as I was putting this together. But not only the people in this room who are gonna be your future sort of network and colleagues, but also people at conferences, TRB. Many of the people I've worked with I've met at TRB or ACSP or some other conference, and it's led to really productive research collaborations. Technical skills, as you're looking to your next steps after grad school, technical skills are really valuable. I think that's one of the things that kept me at Lime through a couple rounds of layoffs, was that I could actually code and not just manage and oversee things, but I could actually make, have tangible impact on the business. So for me, that was R, that was surveys, statistical modeling. For other people, it might be GIS or SQL or Python, whatever it might be. But those skills are very valuable, not only in industry, but even at the state as well. I'll finish with some unsolicited advice. If I could do it all over again, that was one of the prompts, I would take Alyssa Kendall's classes. I took actually her LCA class as an undergrad, but didn't take any as a grad student. I wish I had, because it is very useful. I did listen to Susan, but maybe not as much as I should have. So listen to your advisor, they know what they're doing. I can be very independent-minded, and Susan was very patient with me. So thank you, Susan. If you're in your first year, of your master's your master's degree, PhD degree, it's not too early to start thinking about jobs you want and what are the skills that are listed there, what is the experience that they want. I didn't do that until my 5th year of my PhD, so I would highly advise you to start thinking about that earlier. And last but not least, again, I'm in industry. There just aren't enough people, in my personal opinion, at transportation startups. I think there should be more of them. And I think it's really a matter of framing your experience in a way that a startup or industry can understand. And also just being creative about where you might fit in to those companies. I'm on the policy and communications team, which is a very natural fit, but operations teams can be a really great fit for a TTP grad, data science, depending on your expertise. So that's, again, unsolicited, but hopefully helpful advice as you start to think about what your next career step is. That's it.
All right, what a fabulous overview of all these different jobs that you guys have gone on to. And so, I want to just kind of open it up to folks in the room. I mean, this is a really, really great resource of folks to talk to. You don't just have to take it from us, old Haji professors. Listen to these guys about what kind of real life experiences they've had. Any questions for our alumni? Susan? Well, any from a student? Really? You guys don't have any questions for your
Speechless.
past compatriots?
Well, then I'll kick it
Okay,
off with
yeah,
just
okay.
a couple of reflections on what you all talked about. First, thank you so much. That was fabulous. I think I can speak for all the other faculty here that it's so great to see you come back and talk about the amazing things you're doing. Love it. But the how you are connecting with other ITS graduates is really fun and interesting to hear about. How you just through your jobs you're running into other people who've been through here as well. That also makes us really happy and excited. But so you talked about data science. You said technical skills at the end. Katrina talked about interviews. You talked about the value of those open-ended questions. So maybe that is a question for you, sort of reflecting on there. The numbers are important and all that technical skill around numbers, but also the words and the social science side. I don't know if you have things to add about the importance of both of those.
I can start off. I loved hearing that you find interviews useful because they were, they're very useful, depending on what your question is. Also, at least at Lime, a lot of our product researchers use focus groups and interviews very heavily as they're testing out new, app features or new hardware. And so, depending on what your question is, sometimes the data doesn't tell you. For example, with some of our parking research, it just didn't make sense to use all that GPS data, all that big data we have. It's still not accurate enough to answer the question we needed, so we needed to send students out. And likewise with interviews, asking people about what they're thinking when they're parking, like, why did you do that, can really be really enlightening. So I think being able to borrow across different methods is really useful.
Yeah, storytelling, we don't talk about that much in grad school, but advocacy and policy or politics is all stories. And so what is it that people can sink their teeth into? And another plug for surveys, I have been aghast at how uninformed people are writing surveys. Taking the survey, I don't know if it's still offered here, survey design at Davis, just understanding what makes it onto page one. What are the priorities? How do you frame questions so you can actually get a clear answer that's phrase double-barreled question. It comes up in my dreams, honestly. And that's a really rare skill, actually. And I think it's a rare class. And so if you ever plan to work with people, knowing how to write a survey, I think it's huge. For that reason, we're so obsessed with AI and big data, but there's a lot that you can't do with that information.
I'll say that too, actually, literally the meeting, I was 5 minutes late, and because another meeting ran long, and we're about to go out and do surveys in Sacramento, and so that's why I'm here, I'm very excited, but I just skimmed through the survey, and I was I know a little bit about surveys, and there was one question. I was I know you weren't asking for feedback, but let me just tell you, you should change this one thing, and they're oh, okay, we'll just do that. So it was just kind of interesting to take a step back and think about this is not what you asked me to do, but I'm just gonna put a little bit of a plug in there because that's I have experience in that sector, and I think overall the end goal is to have a good survey, get good data, and then help inform transportation decisions. And so thinking about this one small thing, in theory, could kind of step up into other important parts of the ZE process.
I guess my question is for you, Calvin, but feel free to answer if you guys think you have input as well. So I'll share my hesitation when it comes to job applications. I'm doing a PhD, and I feel like if I enter into a job that's non-academic, I might not apply all of the skills I've painstakingly learned. It's kind of like, how do you balance that? And like, I was wondering, do you get to apply your technical skills in your role as
I'm not doing statistical modeling anymore. Well, we can say that, but I'm still using R on a regular basis.
Okay.
So your question is?
The question is like, how do you deal with that? Like, do you feel like you're missing out on using those skills, or you just over your life? Like, well, whatever.
I would say it's a trade-off, right? Like I don't do that anymore, but at the same time I'm getting to do really like, again, that like research translating to practice. And I find that much more rewarding than, again, like making my model that much more, complex or technical, or like doing that side of things. I'm much more interested in, let's do interesting experiments, and let's ask interesting questions. And to me, that's where I find a lot of value, at least in my work. I don't know about yours.
Can I actually follow up on that?
Yeah.
So even if you're not doing like statistical analysis yourself, I guess, do you oversee any of that? Do you have the opportunity to like interpret that? And then if so, has that been, having the sort of knowledge in that domain, has that been helpful?
Yeah, that's fair. In one of the parking studies I was referring to, I didn't do the statistical modeling. Someone else, as a grad student, did. And because I had the background, I could ask good questions and challenging questions and improve the work, but I wasn't doing it myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, not much of my work has statistical modeling involved. That's what the data science team does. Again, like evaluating different pricing or different app features or new hardware or whatever. They do statistical testing all the time, A/B tests and things like that. But that's just not what I do.
Yeah, I think I can add to that. So sometimes the technical role is kind of a phase in your career. So even though when you graduate from grad school, you think that you're going to do technical work, but after 5 years, 6 years, something can happen in the workplace. Like in my case, my manager retired, and somebody had to step up, and they asked for a person who has the technical background to manage, the research projects, for instance, in my case. So, yeah, even though right now, I bet you guys don't really think that phase. You kind of focus on the technical role, right? But I would say it's very common with PhDs in state or even in the industry to kind of get more responsible and switch to a phase where you don't directly do technical or oversee the programs.
And also you continue learning. Like I didn't know any spatial stats when I graduated. That's all I did at the lab, and then learn machine learning because that's what people had to do. And so I think I didn't use my PhD hardly at all, but you got me in the door, and then you can like you have a stronger set of tools to evaluate things and like understand, call BS. But also you don't stop learning just because you graduate. So I think that's really fun. Is like you're not necessarily doing another dissertation in every job, but there's opportunities to keep learning new skills and like evolve. Sorry.
Thank you.
I was just going to say the same thing happens in academia.
Yeah.
When did I last
kind of, but you're
run a
so
model? And then you're doing more management.
Yes.
So it's a follow-up question, and to Natalie, you also mentioned that you advise us to be visionary, to see what coming in the next 5 years, things like that. So do you have any advice, like what kind of skills that you see will be useful for us to learn now, that you see like it will be useful to apply in the next 5 years?
Systems thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's something like I forgot to answer that. And I think holistic life cycle analysis and also like systems level design is, I don't know what the status is at Davis anymore, but like I wish I had been exposed to that before finishing grad school and thinking about how all the parts mix together. What are all the like unintended consequences of decarbonizing one mode or having great, I don't know, not to poke at Lyme access, but like what are the things that might be going wrong with Lyme access? Like it's really easy to look at our result and celebrate that. And I don't have any training in systems thinking, but reading about it, I'm like, we should be making all of our decisions in terms of like an entire network, of an entire system. It's a global ecosystem. And I have no idea how to do that per se, but it's something that, especially in policy, probably in the private sector, for sure in academia, it's like blinders. So that's kind of abstract advice, but I don't have like a, you know, the price of hydrogen is going to be X in 5 years, like you should go invest in that. But like trying to anticipate unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So I had a question because, so I'd say like with transportation technology and policy, the program's like pretty niche to California, and like trying to like explain that to other people, like what we actually learn and know. And so I also was talking to like a professor at ASU who went here, and he was like having trouble like explaining what he does. And so like, how did you go about like working around and going and applying to jobs? Mostly, I'm assuming you guys are all in California. So how do you guys go about like explaining the importance of your job when it's on really as like, I guess, discipline as like urban planning or like civil engineering?
I would say it's hard. It is a challenge for if you're applying for academic jobs. It can be hard to sort of convey your background. I don't think it's as much of a challenge for like state jobs.
Yeah, I
or
think
even
state
industry.
agencies, people know RTA statements.
Yeah.
Actually, they're like big support. Most programs, they're big support of RTA statements historically. So people know what kind of education we are going through here.
Yeah, I think it was a huge asset to me to have graduated from ITS Davis when I was applying at Lyme. Like, that people knew about ITS Davis, and that was really cool.
I didn't apply for any jobs. They just saw that I went to this program and wanted me to go work.
That's how valuable it is. ITS, you're hired.
It's so special.
Yeah.
It's so special. So don't be intimidated that I leverage that.
Yeah.
So you all are working for a different type of organization. So I'm really tempted to ask you this. How is the work-life balance like?
Well, yeah, it is.
I think I would say state has a big advantage on that because we have a very established fiscal calendar that doesn't change very often. So in general, the state, I'm not sure about the federal. I think federal is much more dynamic depending on elections and everything, politics, but state agencies in general, I think, has been very stable. And that stable is the kind of, gives you the opportunity kind of flexibility to speed out. Sometimes if you have something in your personal life, you can, family commitments, you can actually have more flexibility to balance it. But it really depends on also the people you're working with. Like not just the type of organization, but actually your manager. This makes a big difference. Sometimes your manager's style. It doesn't matter if it's Google or a resources board. Sometimes you can work with a manager who just doesn't have a very structured way of working. So you can get emails in the middle of the night and stuff. But yeah, I mean overall, in my experience, I think that has been the primary reason for me to stay in the state agency, even though I had a very difficult time in my first 4 years, especially before all the reforms during COVID, telework opportunities came out. The agency itself changed a lot over the last 4 years. But my first 4 years, I had a very difficult time, but I still kind of try to be patient and stay. I'm glad I did.
I have a terrible work-life balance just personally, but CALSTART as a whole has been like pretty flexible with it because I am 100% remote. Like they mailed me a laptop and they're like, go wild. They also mailed me a screen and a chair. So I didn't expect a chair, so that was kind of fun. It's like a DIY in the living room, like putting it together. But yeah, so I would say I personally have a poor work-life balance, but that's a me problem. CALSTART has been totally flexible. Just, very collaborative and understanding that, things happen, but also like we have deadlines to apply for grants and stuff. So we do have to be sort of flexible. But overall, I mean, it's been fine. I haven't had any like really serious issues, and my boss and like the structural hierarchy has been very like understanding, and like we're figuring it out together. Like I'm not worried about it, I guess.
In my particular role, I have good work-life balance. I'm in sort of a central role and a little bit protected from some of the day-to-day challenge of like the operations team or a government relations team. So my team actually is one of the longest tenured at Lyme. I've been there 5.5 years. Brandon Haydu, who was at ITS Davis, who's on my team, has been there 5.5 years. My boss has been there same amount of time. So it really depends, I think, on your role and definitely your manager and kind of what they expect. We technically have unlimited PTO. I don't take unlimited PTO, but it's there if you need it.
Do you get free snacks?
Not anymore.
Oh.
No, that was the glory days before the pandemic. We had catered lunches. No more.
I'd say Berkeley's like kind of it's a double-edged sword, and like on the one hand it's the Fed's easy work balance, great. The labs, there's a bit of tension because it's all soft money, which I didn't know when I was hired. And all of our hours are billable, but your performance and your pay and your promotions are all tied to your publications and your funding for to bring in, none of which is billable. So there's a lot of tension, and you have to kind of like thread a needle where you're not working weekends, but you are still finding time to write these 20-page proposals and do academic papers on the side, even though you're probably getting funded by government agencies that want like quarterly reports. And so I've seen all of it. Like I've found a pretty good balance, but there are folks I know who've been there 15 years who don't know where their funding's gonna come in the fall. There are folks like that maybe have like written a bunch of reports, but then have to like squeeze in time to write academic papers on the evenings and weekends, and that's like a horrible model. Then there are people who are fully funded by philanthropy and don't even deal with the government money, which I highly recommend, and have complete autonomy to do whatever they want. So I've seen like a whole spectrum, and I think that's the hard thing is there's no expectation or model for what's appropriate, and you have to really advocate for your own work-life balance and not get like completely pummeled by the expectations of paperwork and publication and like raising your own salary. There's a few downsides.
I also say time zones.
Mm-hmm.
Like my boss and his boss are on the East Coast, and they're morning people, and I am not a morning people. I am a nocturnal people, so it's kind of a struggle, but that's just sort of like the balance to have to kind of hit with, working with people who are on the computer screen.
That's why you're taking naps.
Yeah, that's why I take naps. This is like, nap time is about like 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Like, we're getting close.
But that's really a very good question. Yeah. If you're thinking about this in grad school, I think you're on the right track.
It's all better than grad school, right?
Grad school's fun.
Just kidding.
I will ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so this might come as a really like beginner level question because I actually haven't started grad school yet. But I just wonder, like, grad students are allowed to work like 20 hours a week, at Davis, right? So like I do think I guess 10 hours a week working as an on-the job, like GSRTA to get my tuition covered. But the other 10 hours a week, I'm trying to think about some like like off-campus work, you know, like at various agencies in order to enrich my experience in those various fields. So I wonder, like, do you guys have any suggestions on? Well, I'm a master's in TP, right? So like, do you guys have any suggestions on how we can allocate those hours, and also should we work continuously work at the same company, or should we kind of switch between companies when we intern? You know, like what kind, you know, has to the best outcome, like to gain as much experience as possible. Thank you.
I wouldn't do it. Not first year, I think that's a lot to take on, but you might have a different.
No, yeah,
perspective.
I didn't try to work 40 hours a week. Like,
20.
right, but I wasn't trying to essentially work a full-time job.
Plus coursework.
Less coursework is
A
what
lot
I'm
of
saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
We hire interns.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, State Cog has interns. I mean, there's lots of, I'm sure there's lots of remote internships as well that could probably fill that time.
I'd be curious.
But yeah, I would ask
Susan or Al, like, what do you
advisors.
tell your
Well,
students?
yeah, I mean, I think it works, sometimes students take a quarter of
Yeah.
their summer and do something off campus, but if you're being hired as a GSR, you're probably being hired at 50%, because if you're hired at 25%, we have to pay your tuition and fees anyway.
Yeah.
So we don't like doing that.
Yeah. So the way you can think about it is like that 50% is to do the GSR work, but that other 20 hours is actually to progress your like academic
Right.
standing, and so that those other 20 hours are like classes and that sort of thing. So you're really talking about classes, you know, plus your GSR, and then on top of that to do, you know, an internship that would be at least in the very first year. Yeah, it would probably be difficult. Yeah. Dan, I saw you had a question earlier. Did you raise your hand?
It was a hard question, and I see we're at 3 o'clock.
No.
so-
Yes. Oh, okay. Want to be respectful of everyone's time. 3 o'clock, we're officially ended. So thank you once again to everyone. Big round of applause for our alumni.